I was pouring iced tea in my own kitchen when my daughter formally banned me from her wedding. I am Jasmine Elliott. I am 65 years old, a widow, and I have spent the last 30 years running a modest 10-acre property just outside the city limits. My fingernails usually have a little potting soil under them, and I prefer a worn pair of denim overalls to a designer dress. My daughter, Savannah, sat at my scarred oak dining table, carefully wiping a speck of dust off her manicured finger. She had stopped by unannounced, carrying a thick binder filled with glossy wedding plans. Savannah was marrying into a very wealthy family, and for the past 6 months, she had been meticulously erasing any trace of her rural upbringing to fit into their world. "I am keeping the guest list strictly curated, Mom," Savannah announced, not bothering to look up from her binder. "Julian's family expects a certain level of polish. Your whole country, clumsy aesthetic just does not fit the vision. You understand, right? It would just be embarrassing for everyone if you showed up." She delivered this crushing blow with the casual tone of someone ordering a coffee. She expected me to cry, to beg, or to promise I would buy an expensive dress and stay quiet in the corner. I did not do any of those things. I did not yell. And I certainly did not shed a tear for a girl who viewed her own mother as a visual liability. I set the heavy glass pitcher down on the counter. I wiped my hands on my apron, feeling the coarse, familiar fabric. "I understand completely," I replied, my voice steady and entirely devoid of the emotion she was waiting to feed on. Savannah blinked, clearly thrown by my calm acceptance. She opened her mouth to explain further, to twist the knife, but I simply turned my back and started washing the strawberries in the sink. The conversation was over. If I was not good enough for her wedding, she was about to learn exactly what else my country aesthetic would no longer tolerate. Savannah assumed my exclusion from the venue did not extend to my bank account. For the past year, I had allowed her to remain an authorized user on a secondary credit card to help with minor emergencies. She had recently started using it to put down deposits for her extravagant floral arrangements, expecting me to quietly foot the bill as a silent, dutiful mother. The morning after she banned me, I drove my old pickup truck directly to the local bank branch. I did not call a lawyer, and I did not send her a lengthy, emotional text message explaining my feelings. I simply sat across from the bank teller and requested a complete removal of Savannah's name from all my accounts. I canceled the secondary card and transferred my savings into a new, secure account that only I could access. At 2:00 p.m. that afternoon, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Savannah's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring. A minute later, a frantic text message appeared. "Mom, why is the card declining? The caterer needs the final $10,000 today. Fix this right now." I dried my hands on a kitchen towel, picked up the phone, and typed a very brief response. "My country money does not fit the vision for your event. Budget accordingly." I hit send and immediately switched my phone to Do Not Disturb. I walked out to the back porch, breathing in the scent of the impending summer rain. For years, I had bent over backward to accommodate my daughter's demands, hoping to buy her respect. Taking my financial power back felt like putting down a 100-pound weight I had been carrying for decades. Savannah had wanted to curate her life, entirely separate from my messy, rural existence. I was simply honoring her boundary. She was about to discover that curating a high society facade is incredibly difficult when you are suddenly forced to fund it yourself. 2 days later, the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway interrupted my morning gardening. I stood up, wiping the dirt from my knees, expecting to see a feed delivery truck. Instead, a sleek, dark luxury sedan parked near the barn. A young man in a crisp button-down shirt and tailored slacks stepped out, looking slightly out of place but genuinely polite. It was Julian, Savannah's fiancé. I had only met him twice, briefly, during hurried dinners where Savannah dominated the conversation and rushed him out the door. Julian walked up to the fence, offering a warm, apologetic smile. "Jasmine, I hope I am not intruding. Savannah told me you were feeling terribly ill and could not handle the stress of the wedding crowds. I just wanted to drop off some homemade soup and check on you." I stared at him, piecing the puzzle together. Savannah had not told him she banned me for being an embarrassment. She had painted a tragic picture of a frail, sickly mother to gain his sympathy while keeping me hidden. "I appreciate the gesture, Julian," I noted, taking the container from his hands. "But as you can see, I am perfectly healthy." Julian frowned, his polite smile faltering as he looked around my well-kept property. "She also mentioned you were struggling to keep this place afloat, which is why we've been transferring extra money to her account to cover your property taxes." I froze. I owned my farm outright. I had no debt, and I certainly never needed Julian's family to pay my taxes. Savannah was actively siphoning money from her wealthy groom, using my fabricated poverty as a convenient excuse. I didn't launch into a hysterical defense or drag my daughter's name through the mud right then. I simply looked Julian in the eye and stated, "I own this land, free and clear. I suggest you ask Savannah exactly where your money is going." I turned and walked back to my garden, leaving him standing in the driveway with a very heavy truth. Later that afternoon, I found a thick, leather-bound notebook sitting on the edge of my patio table. Savannah must have left it behind during her arrogant visit earlier in the week. The cover was embossed with gold lettering, "Wedding Logistics." I flipped the book open. I did not need to hire a private investigator or set a complicated legal trap. Savannah's own arrogance had provided all the evidence I needed. The pages were filled with meticulously tracked columns of numbers. On the left side, she listed the actual prices of her vendors, the caterer, the florist, the venue. On the right side, she listed heavily inflated numbers under the heading "Amount Billed to Julian." She was doubling the costs of every single wedding expense and pocketing the difference. Toward the back of the notebook, I found a separate page titled "Debt Consolidation." Savannah was using the stolen funds from her fiancé to secretly pay off massive credit card debts she had hidden from him. Beside a note about Julian's mother, she had scribbled, "Pretentious snob, just smile and take the check." She was building her entire royal marriage on a foundation of theft and contempt. She thought she was the smartest person in the room, manipulating a wealthy family while keeping her country mother locked away so her two worlds would never collide. I closed the notebook. The leather felt cool against my palms. I did not feel the urge to call her and scream. I did not want to negotiate an apology. She had made her choices, entirely clear and coldly calculated. I walked into my house, set the notebook on the kitchen counter, and began to formulate exactly how I would return this misplaced item to its rightful owner. The fallout from cutting off the credit card brought my son, David, to my doorstep. David had always been passive, perfectly content to let Savannah steamroll everyone as long as he did not have to deal with her tantrums. He walked into my kitchen without knocking, his face flushed with frustration. "Mom, you need to fix this," David demanded, leaning heavily against the counter. "Savannah is losing her mind. Her florist is threatening to cancel. Just write the check." Why are you being so difficult right before her big day? I continued chopping vegetables for my dinner, the knife hitting the cutting board with a steady, rhythmic thud. She made it clear I am not welcome at her big day. My money is not welcome either. You are embarrassing the family? David groaned, running a hand through his hair. Julian's parents are going to notice if her own mother isn't there. Just apologize. Give her the 10 grand and stay out of the way. It is just easier to give her what she wants. I stopped chopping. I turned to look at my son, seeing the same weak compliance that had allowed Savannah to become a monster. Take your key off your ring and put it on the counter, I ordered, my voice low and absolute. David blinked, utterly confused. What? The spare key to my house. Leave it on the counter. You don't get to walk into my home and demand I fund my own disrespect just to make your life quieter. He tried to argue, but I simply pointed the tip of my kitchen knife toward the countertop. Reluctantly, he unclipped the brass key and set it down. Do not come back until you remember how to speak to your mother, I said. He backed out of the kitchen, finally realizing that the woman he thought was a pushover had permanently changed the rules. With David's key safely in my pocket, I spent the following morning solidifying my boundaries. I called a local locksmith and had every deadbolt on the property swapped out. It was a simple, practical action. But the heavy click of the new lock sliding into place sounded like absolute freedom. Next, I walked up the stairs to the guest bedroom that still held Savannah's childhood clutter. For years, I had kept her old trophies, her winter coats, and her college textbooks exactly where she left them, maintaining a shrine for a daughter who rarely visited. I pulled a stack of heavy cardboard boxes from the shed and began packing. I folded her clothes, boxed up her knickknacks, and stacked everything neatly in the dusty back corner of the detached garage. The physical labor was grounding. I was clearing out the emotional space she had occupied, reclaiming the square footage of my own life. When the room was empty, I returned to the kitchen and picked up her leather-bound wedding notebook. I carefully tore out the pages containing the inflated vendor budgets, the hidden credit card debts, and the insulting notes she had written about Julian's family. I placed the pages into a plain manila folder and sealed it shut. I did not need a grand, dramatic confrontation. I did not need to crash the ceremony and make a scene. Savannah wanted to build a wall between her polished new life and my rural reality. I was simply going to reinforce that wall, ensuring she could never cross back over it when her fraudulent empire inevitably collapsed. The day before the wedding, the summer heat hung thick over the farm. I was out on the porch when Julian's car pulled up the driveway for the second time that week. Savannah had sent him on an errand to collect a set of vintage rustic lanterns from my barn, claiming they were a vital part of her authentic table centerpieces. Julian stepped onto the porch, looking stressed and exhausted. The demands of Savannah's perfect aesthetic were clearly weighing on him. He greeted me politely, though the tension around his eyes was unmistakable. I handed him the heavy wooden crate containing the lanterns. Here is what she asked for, I said smoothly. As Julian gripped the sides of the crate, I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out the sealed manila folder. I slid it right between the glass panes of the lanterns. What is this? Julian asked, glancing down at the brown paper. Savannah left her logistics notebook here, I replied, keeping my expression entirely neutral. I noticed she was struggling to balance the vendor costs. I thought you should have the exact figures she wrote down, just so you know exactly what you are paying for tomorrow. Julian looked at me. The memory of our previous conversation about the fabricated property taxes clearly flashing in his mind. He didn't ask any questions. He nodded slowly, tucked the folder securely under his arm, and carried the crate to his car. I watched him drive away, the dust settling behind his tires. I had handed over the truth without a single insult or accusation. The explosive material was now in the hands of the one person who deserved to know the reality of the woman he was about to marry. The rest was entirely up to him. Saturday arrived with a bright, cloudless sky, 50 miles away in the city. Savannah's extravagant wedding was undoubtedly spinning into a frantic frenzy of imported flowers, silk dresses, and demanding photographers. I did not sit by the window and sulk. I did not stalk her friends' social media pages to see what I was missing. I put on my favorite worn overalls, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and walked out into the sunshine. I spent the morning staking my tomato plants and the afternoon baking a peach cobbler from scratch. The farm was incredibly quiet, bathed in the kind of deep, resonant peace that only comes from removing a toxic element from your life. Around 3 p.m., my phone began to vibrate on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the screen. A flood of text messages from Savannah appeared in rapid succession. "Mom, did I leave my notebook there? I can't find it anywhere." "Mom, answer me. The caterer is asking for the final check and Julian is acting weird. Where is my book?" I picked up the phone. I did not reply to her panic. I simply opened her contact profile, scrolled to the bottom of the screen, and tapped the button to block her number. The device went silent. I set it back down on this counter and returned to my baking, savoring the smell of warm cinnamon filling my kitchen. The storm was brewing in the city, but out here in the country, the weather was absolutely perfect. By 9 p.m., the quiet of the farm was absolute. I sat in my favorite armchair with a cup of herbal tea, casually scrolling through the local newsfeed on my tablet. I wasn't looking for wedding photos, but in today's digital age, a disaster of that magnitude travels faster than wildfire. A video clip was trending locally, shared hundreds of times across different platforms. The thumbnail showed a blurry image of a grand ballroom, glowing with expensive crystal chandeliers. I tapped the screen and watched the scene unfold. Julian was standing at the head table, holding a microphone. Savannah sat beside him in her massive designer gown, wearing a frozen, terrified smile. Julian did not look like a man in love. He looked like a man who had just read a manila folder full of lies. "I thought I was marrying a woman of integrity," Julian's voice echoed through the massive ballroom. "But I just found out she has been inflating our wedding budget to secretly pay off her own debts, stealing from my family, and laughing at us behind our backs." The crowd of wealthy guests gasped in unison. Savannah jumped up from her chair, reaching for Julian's arm, her perfect facade crumbling into sheer panic as she tried to grab the microphone. Julian stepped back. In a swift, unscripted moment of pure disgust, he picked up his full glass of red wine and threw it directly into Savannah's face. The dark liquid splashed across her shocked features, soaking instantly into the pristine white silk of her expensive dress. The video cut out amid the chaotic screaming of the guests. I locked the tablet screen and set it on the side table. The aesthetic she had sacrificed her own mother to protect was permanently ruined. I took a slow sip of my tea. I knew exactly what had happened, and I felt nothing but a profound, untouchable calm. It took less than 3 hours for the fallout to reach my doorstep. Shortly after midnight, headlights cut through the darkness of my driveway. A car slammed into park, and heavy footsteps crunched rapidly up the gravel path. I walked out to the screened-in porch and flipped on the overhead light. Savannah was standing on the other side of the screen door. Her hair was matted, her face streaked with ruined makeup, and the front of her expensive dress was stained a deep, glaring crimson. She looked frantic, reaching for the handle of the door. It was locked. "Mom, let me in!" Savannah sobbed, pulling desperately at the handle. Julian canceled the wedding. He froze the accounts. "I don't have anywhere to go, and I need money to pay the hotel bill." I stood on my side of the screen, my hands resting comfortably in the pockets of my overalls. I looked at the woman who had banned me from her life just days prior. "Your boxes are stacked in the detached garage," I noted, my voice calm and completely flat. "You can take them in the morning, but you cannot come inside." "You are my mother," she shrieked, stamping her foot on the wooden deck. "You have to help me. You made it very clear that my country aesthetic does not fit your vision." I replied softly. "I am just honoring your boundary. Savannah, go find someone else to fund your lifestyle." I reached over and flicked off the porch light, plunging her into the dark. I turned my back, walked inside, and engaged the new, heavy deadbolt. I did not look out the window as she continued to cry in the driveway. I walked upstairs to my quiet bedroom, slipped under the covers, and finally enjoyed a full, uninterrupted night of sleep. As I sit with Jasmine's story, the biggest takeaway for me isn't about revenge. It's about the quiet, unshakable power of boundaries. For so long, society has told us that just because someone is family, we have to endure their disrespect, shrink ourselves to fit their mold, or literally pay for our own mistreatment. But Jasmine reminds us that you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. And you certainly don't have to fund a life that excludes you. Sometimes, the most profound act of self-love isn't yelling or fighting back. It is simply stepping away, turning off your phone, and changing the locks. We can't control how people view us, but we absolutely control what we tolerate. You never have to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else's illusion warm. If you have ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love, or if you simply found comfort in Jasmine's quiet strength today, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please hit that like button if you believe in protecting your own peace, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story about reclaiming your worth. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.